A call comes in late Friday afternoon, not a movie set, not a studio, a real address in Duarte, California. And when authorities arrive, a veteran actor, someone you've probably seen more times than you realize, has already passed. Here's the part that instantly makes people lean in. Early reports say there was no sign of foul play, and the cause hasn't been released. That combination always lands heavy because it leaves your brain reaching for answers and finding nothing. And then the name hits the internet. TK Carter. If you're thinking, I know that name, but I can't place the face, don't worry. That's exactly the story here. Because TK Carter is one of those actors who lived inside your childhood, your TV nights, your movie marathons, without ever getting the spotlight that matched his impact. And once you hear the roles, you're going to realize something. You didn't just watch this man. You grew up with him. But that's not even the wild part. Because the role that made him iconic almost didn't happen the way people think it did. Let's be honest. Hollywood has two kinds of famous. There's the kind where everyone knows your name. And then there's the kind where everyone knows your face, your voice, your timing. But the credit somehow never catches up. TK Carter was that second kind. The kind of actor you'd see pop up on screen and go, wait, I love that guy. The kind who made a scene feel real without stealing it. The kind who could slide from comedy to seriousness so smoothly, you didn't even notice the switch. You just felt it. And that's why the news hits different for a lot of people. Because it's not just, oh, an actor passed. It's, hold up. That's the guy from, and the guy from, and the guy from. He's linked to cult classic film history, and also tied to some of the most rewatchable TV from the 80s and 90s. And then there's the one that horror fans will never let go. Because in one movie, in one frozen setting, in one pressure cooker story, he became unforgettable. And what happened inside that film is exactly why so many people are speaking his name right now. If you've ever watched John Carpenter's The Thing, you already know the vibe. Isolation, paranoia, men trapped together, and a fear that's not just outside, but possibly sitting right next to you. TK Carter played Knowles, the cook, and that might sound like a small detail until you realize what that character actually does in that movie. Knowles isn't just the cook, he's the guy who keeps the place human. He's the one who brings normal energy into a story that keeps getting more abnormal. He's the person you believe would really be there in real life, dealing with a nightmare like that. And that's the magic of character actors. They're the reason the unbelievable becomes believable. Here's what people forget. The Thing didn't start off as this universally celebrated classic. Over time, it became a cult favorite. One of those movies people rewatch, analyze, quote, rank, argue about, and pass down like a secret handshake. So when someone says, he was in The Thing, horror fans don't hear a credit. They hear legacy. But what's even crazier is what happened after that role. Because most people assume a breakout like that turns into instant stardom. For TK, it turned into something else. Something a lot more complicated. There's a hard truth about Hollywood. A cult classic can make fans love you forever. But it doesn't always make the industry treat you like a headliner. TK Carter stayed working, stayed booked, stayed visible, but the way he moved through entertainment wasn't like the star. It was like the glue, the reliable hitter, the scene lifter, the castest guy, and the chemistry will work tight. And that's why people are shocked today, because his resume isn't one big moment. It's decades of moments. You see him in movies, you hear him in animation, you catch him in sitcoms. You spot him in dramas. He's like a familiar face that keeps showing up at different points of your life. And then, for a whole generation, he shows up somewhere even louder. Because there's a stretch of television where he becomes a steady presence, like he's part of the room with you. And once I say the title, you're going to remember exactly where you were when you watched it. But before we go there, understand this. What made him special wasn't just talent, it was range. And that range is exactly what set up the next chapter of his story. If you've ever watched John Carpenter's The Thing, you already know the vibe. Isolation, paranoia, men trapped together, and a fear that's not just outside, but possibly sitting right next to you. T.K. Carter played Knowles, the cook, and that might sound like a small detail until you realize what that character actually does in that movie. Knowles isn't just the cook, he's the guy who keeps the place human. He's the one who brings normal energy into a story that keeps getting more abnormal. He's the person you believe would really be there in real life, dealing with a nightmare like that. And that's the magic of character actors. They're the reason the unbelievable becomes believable. Here's what people forget. The Thing didn't start off as this universally celebrated classic. Over time, it became a cult favorite. One of those movies people rewatch, analyze, quote, rank, argue about, and pass down like a secret handshake. So when someone says, he was in The Thing, horror fans don't hear a credit, they hear legacy. But what's even crazier is what happened after that role, because most people assume a breakout like that turns into instant stardom. For TK, it turned into something else, something a lot more complicated. There's a hard truth about Hollywood. A cult classic can make fans love you forever, but it doesn't always make the industry treat you like a headliner. TK Carter stayed working, stayed booked, stayed visible, but the way he moved through entertainment wasn't like the star. It was like the glue, the reliable hitter, the scene lifter, the castest guy, and the chemistry will work tight. And that's why people are shocked today, because his resume isn't one big moment. It's decades of moments. You see him in movies, you hear him in animation, you catch him in sitcoms, you spot him in dramas. He's like a familiar face that keeps showing up at different points of your life. And then, for a whole generation, he shows up somewhere even louder. Because there's a stretch of television where he becomes a steady presence, like he's part of the room with you. And once I say the title, you're going to remember exactly where you were when you watched it. But before we go there, understand this. What made him special wasn't just talent, it was range. And that range is exactly what set up the next chapter of his story. Here's the mid-story truth people don't like to admit. You can be talented, you can be consistent, you can be memorable, and you can still spend years feeling like the door only opens halfway. That's what makes The Corner such a pivotal moment in T.K. Carter's career. Because this wasn't a quick laugh, a sitcom beat, or a fun cameo. This was heavy, human, uncomfortable in the way real life is uncomfortable. It's the kind of story where you can't hide behind charm. You have to deliver truth. And by multiple accounts, he fought just to get a real shot at it. He talked about struggling to even get an audition, and how things only shifted when the right connection aligned at the right time. That right there is the part every creative understands. You can be ready and still need a break just to be seen. And when he finally got the chance, he didn't play it safe. He basically told them, this is me. This role fits me. That kind of conviction isn't just performance. That's identity. And once he got in, he delivered a portrayal that people still call underrated. But what he said around that time, that's what makes the story feel like a message now. Because his words didn't sound like somebody chasing applause. They sounded like somebody fighting for meaning. Later in life, T.K. Carter started talking less like an actor promoting projects and more like a man trying to leave something behind. He said things that hit straight to the chest, about not selling out, about knowing his value, about believing people have purpose. And when you hear that, you realize how many people in entertainment carry a quiet wound, being told, directly or indirectly, that they're not enough. He pushed back against that idea in his own way, not with headlines, with staying power, and with a mindset that says, I'm still here, I still matter, and I'm not doing anything just to be included. That's a different kind of confidence, the kind you build after years of being tested. And here's what makes this chapter even heavier. When someone passes and the cause isn't public, people start filling in blanks. But this story doesn't need blanks filled in, because the real impact is what he already told you while he was still here. That he believed people were created with value, that they shouldn't let outside voices destroy their finish line. And that message hits harder now because his timeline stopped, but his words didn't. And what happened next is why so many people are rushing to rewatch his work tonight. Now let's talk about a totally different lane, because this is where people go, wait, that was him. In Space Jam, T.K. Carter voiced one of the characters tied to the Monstars, Not. And that's important because voice roles are the ultimate you know him without knowing him situation. You can be part of an iconic film, and people might never connect your face to it, but your voice still lives in their memory. So now you've got this strange reality. He's attached to one of the most respected cult horror films ever, and also attached to one of the most rewatched sports family movies ever. That range is rare, and it gets even more impressive when you look at how long he kept showing up in modern TV. Because even late in the game, he didn't fade out. He kept landing roles in newer series, newer formats, new audiences, which is why the news feels sudden for many people, because the last time they saw him wasn't years ago. It was recently. And that detail matters, because it makes the next part feel even more real. One of the easiest myths to believe is that actors from older eras disappear. But T.K. Carter didn't disappear. He stayed active into 2023 with multi-episode runs, including appearances in shows that a lot of people watched in real time, meaning this wasn't a distant memory. This was a working actor, still moving, still contributing, still building. And that's the part that makes people pause, because when the public sees someone still showing up, it creates the feeling that they're still around in life too. Then the headline hits, and suddenly everyone starts doing that thing we all do. We rewind. We start pulling up clips. We start remembering scenes. We start realizing the emotional role certain actors played in our lives, even if we never met them. And as tributes spread, the same sentence keeps popping up in different forms. He was in everything. That's not exaggeration. That's impact. But now we have to talk about the moment that started this entire wave of remembrance, because the details of that Friday afternoon are what turned a private ending into a public story. And the way it's being reported has people stuck on one question: what really happened in those final hours? Here's what multiple reports agree on. T.K. Carter was found at his residence in Duarte, California, after a call for service and a welfare check response. Authorities noted no immediate signs of foul play, and as of now, the cause of passing has not been publicly released. That's the factual lane. But then there's the other lane, the one the internet always creates, where people start trying to turn a real person into a mystery story. So let's be clear. If you see speculation online, treat it as speculation, not facts. Some outlets have included extra details about how the call happened. Some report timing and phrasing differently, and until something official is shared, the only respectful move is not to turn uncertainty into a rumor machine, because the focus here shouldn't be on turning his passing into content. The focus should be on what his life already proved, and it proved something a lot of people are uncomfortable saying out loud. You can be essential to the culture and still not get the flowers until the last moment. But that wasn't the whole story, because after the reports, the next wave hit hard. The wave where fans started speaking from the heart. And what they're saying tells you exactly what kind of legacy T.K. Carter really left. Once the news spread, the reactions followed fast. Not polished statements, not PR talk. Real people online saying things like, I literally can't pin down a show, because I've seen him on so many. That's one of the most powerful compliments a working actor can receive, because it means your presence became part of people's everyday life. And some tributes weren't even about a specific movie or show. They were about how he made them feel. Comforted, entertained, like the world was normal for 30 minutes. That's not small. And you also saw fellow entertainers paying respect, calling him a comedy brother, or talking about how meaningful it was to see him working early on. That's the part the audience doesn't always see, the backstage respect, the quiet influence. The way one working actor can inspire another by simply existing in the space. And then you realize something deeper. T.K. Carter's legacy isn't one viral moment. It's longevity. It's resilience. It's staying in the game long enough to be remembered by multiple generations without ever changing who you are to fit the moment. And that connects directly to the words he left behind. Because the more you hear what he said about value, purpose, and finishing the race, the more it feels like he was talking to all of us. And that's where this story becomes bigger than entertainment. In some of his most recent reflections, T.K. Carter spoke about drive changing as you get older. Not in a bitter way, in a real way. He talked about shifting focus, less chasing the spotlight, more helping from behind the scenes, more wanting to guide new talent, more wanting to make sure people understood their own worth. And that's something you don't hear from everybody. A lot of people leave the industry angry, but he sounded like somebody who made peace with the game while still protecting his standards. He said he never sold out, that he knew he had value, and he pushed the idea that people are not worthless, that sometimes it's the world that tries to make you feel that way so you don't fulfill what you're capable of. Read that again and tell me that doesn't hit different after the news, because now it's not just a quote. It feels like a reminder, like a man leaving something behind on purpose. And when you connect that mindset to the kind of career he had, decades of work, comedy and drama, cult classics and mainstream hits, it becomes clear. He wasn't just surviving Hollywood, he was resisting it. And that resistance is exactly why his legacy is being discussed so intensely today. But there's one last piece that makes this story linger. It's not a statistic, it's a question that follows every character actor, every unsung contributor, every person whose value gets recognized late. And once you hear it, you might not stop thinking about it. Here's the question. Why do we wait? Why do we wait until someone passes to say, he was in everything? Why do we wait until the headlines to pull up the clips? Why do we wait until the final chapter to admit someone mattered to the soundtrack of our lives? Because T.K. Carter didn't just work. He was part of people's memories. Horror fans will always remember Knowles in That Frozen Nightmare. 90s kids will remember him in sitcom energy. Movie fans will remember Space Jam and realize his voice was part of something iconic. And drama fans will bring up The Corner with a different level of respect, because that role wasn't just acting, it was pain and truth on screen. So let's do something different right now. Instead of letting this be another headline you scroll past, drop a comment. Where do you remember T.K. Carter from? What scene sticks out? What show did you watch him on without even realizing it? And if you're a creator, an artist, or somebody chasing something big, take one thing from his story. Longevity is a form of victory, even when the spotlight doesn't match the work. And the next time you see a familiar face pop up in a movie or show, maybe give them their flowers in real time, because those people are the ones holding the whole thing together. If you want the next chapter when it drops, subscribe.